Hi, and welcome to this session on user interface configuration for the SFX A to Z list. My name is Carrie Bartels, and I'm a trainer in Ex-Libris North America. First, we'll take a tour of the A to Z list, what it looks like, how it works. And then we'll take a look at how to customize it using the SFX Admin Center. Then we'll take a look at where you can customize language and text labels that appear in the A to Z list interface as well. I'll mention at this point that this session may seem like an overwhelmingly long list of choices that you need to make decisions about, and that's not really the case. In SFX, we already have defaults that are set, and generally speaking, you may not actually change a lot of those defaults. Keep in mind that I'm just showing you all of the possibilities, and in doing so, educating you a little bit more on how the A to Z list user interface works. The best approach to user interface design is really testing and then seeing what needs to be changed to make the best possible experience for your users. After this presentation, you'll know where and how to customize A to Z lists and what customizations are available. Where to customize the translation and language display if there are text elements that you do want to change in the SFX, the A to Z list user interface. And then also just some general best practices for user interface customizations. So let's start with how the A to Z list looks and how it works in general. By default, your A to Z list can be accessed by entering your SFX base URL. So this is your host name, port, and your instance name, and this will be provided to you by your SFX implementation team, along with a /AZ at the end of the URL. And note that this is an A to Z list of all of your eJournal titles. Now let's go ahead and go to the A to Z list, and I'll show you this live, and we'll take a little tour of it. So notice here is my training server, host name, or my base URL. So it would be my host name and port and my instance as well, and then a /AZ that's at the end of the URL. When we first go to the default A to Z list screen, we'll see at the very top of the screen, just working from the top here, a header image. And by default, we have the Ex-Libris logo, but you can replace this with your institution's logo. You'll also notice on the right-hand side that there's a drop-down list of languages. The main portion of the screen defaults to the Title tab, and we'll actually see 4 tabs that display here, but it will default to the Title tab. And this is where you can browse or search for journals by title. So here what I'm going to do is that, well, you can perform an open search by clicking, or by pressing, or selecting an asterisk in the title area. You can type in the name of a title, or I'm just going to actually use the alphabet, the letters here at the top, and we'll search for titles that begin with the letter A. And here we go. We have search results. I'm just going to scroll down the screen here. So the search results that display default to a brief view, which is actually called the table view. And this is where I can see the journal title, the ISSN, and then I have 2 icons that display here, an information icon, which we'll take a look at in just a minute, and the SFX swirly icon, and that displays the SFX menu with any active targets and target services that contain the resource. So actually, let's take a look here, the AMA Archives of Dermatology. I'm going to click on the SFX swirly icon. Notice it opens a new tab in my browser. And this is the SFX menu that displays with active targets and target services that have or contain the specific object. So I'm going to go ahead and close that SFX menu and go back to the results here. If I click on the information icon, so I'll click on that little I button here, and I'll get a pop-up window with additional details about the title, including, for example, an abbreviation. I will see the ISSN, and I'll also see whether it's peer-reviewed. And I will see availability, so which target and target service this might be from. And also notice I see the threshold information, in other words, the date coverage that's applicable for this particular title in Elsevier Scopus. I see a category and a subcategory. So I will also see that information. And categories and subcategories are assigned to eJournal titles in SFX, and they're assigned by default. And we'll also see related object information. In other words, journal history. So in this case, it looks like it was continued by a couple of different other titles here. So speaking of related objects, or in other words, related titles like we're seeing here, if you look in my list of titles, you'll see that some of the titles are hyperlinked, as we see here with AMA Archives of Dermatology, while other titles are not, like, for instance, the AC Flyer. The hyperlinked titles are titles that you subscribe to and are activated in SFX. The non-hyperlinked titles are related to titles that you have activated. So you don't necessarily subscribe to these titles. For example, the AC Flyer here. So you don't necessarily subscribe to them, you don't have them activated in SFX, but they're related to a title that you do have activated. And there are options to remove related titles that we'll see later on. So if this is confusing to your users, you do have an option to remove these related titles that you see here. If I click on the Switch to Detail view, I'm going to go ahead and click on that now. I'm going to see the same results list, but notice that I get some more details right away. It's the same information we actually saw in the brief or that table view, but here we see some additional information. So such as the category and subcategories that a title might be assigned to in SFX. We also see the related object information here. This particular title was absorbed by another title. And if we scroll down, for a hyperlinked title, one that we have active in our knowledge base or in our SFX instance, notice that we also have which services and targets this particular title is available in, and we also have the threshold date, threshold information that appears here as well. So it just gives us some more information. Again, this is called the detailed view. If we want to switch back to that table view, or in other words, the brief view, I can just click on the link here, switch to table view. When I was mentioning categories and subcategories, that actually ties us into the next tab, which is the Category tab. The Category tab allows you to browse e-journals by category. And the category information is included in the SFX knowledge base. Each title or object in the SFX knowledge base is assigned at least one category and subcategory by default, and this does only apply to e-journal titles. If I select a specific category, we'll select Arts and Humanities here, we can then see the list of subcategories available. And notice that there's a number in parentheses for each subcategory. That indicates the number of titles within that subcategory. And by selecting a subcategory, we'll select Current Events and News, and there are 324 titles that reside in there, and I'll click on the Go button. I then see a list of journals that meet the criteria. So these are all of the journals that are in the subcategory Current Events and News that are in the category Arts and Humanities. So if I scroll down here, notice I have the same display options in the results as I had in the results for the Category tab as I did in the Titles tab. So I see by default here a table view, or in other words a brief view. If I wanted to see more information in the results, right on this first screen I can click on Switch to Table View. And when I do that, here I'll see more information. So for instance, for this first title, notice that it is available as table of contents from EBSCOhost Academic Search Alumni Edition, and it's available from 2001 to the current date. So that's the Category tab. The third tab we'll look at is the Locate tab. And this is where a user can conduct more advanced searches by entering any combination of title keywords, for instance, an ISSN, vendors, they can select a certain vendor, or a category as well. Now in this example, let's select here a list of Arts and Humanities journals. So I'm going to select that as the category from, and I will select from the vendor list EBSCOhost, and I'll go ahead and click on the Go button. And it takes just a second for results to display, and I'm just going to go scroll down here. And again, the display options for the results are the same as in the title and the category tabs. It held on to my detailed view, because that's what I selected in the previous tab, but again, I can switch to that brief or table view just by clicking on the link there. And I now see just a brief view for each of the results. The last tab that we have in our A to Z list is the Citation Linker tab. And using the Citation Linker tab, a user with a citation in hand can search for that article using SFX. And they can just plug in as much or as little information as they have for the citation. So essentially the user is manually creating an open URL that is then sent to the SFX server. So in this example, let's say that we have a citation in hand and we want to see the options for getting full text for that particular citation. So I'm going to enter the journal title, Advances in Astronomy. If I know the ISSN, and I happen to know the ISSN here, if I type it incorrectly, 7969. The date, in this case I know the year, but I don't necessarily know the month or the day, so I'm going to leave those blank. If I knew the volume, the issue, the start page or the end page of the citation, I can enter that information as well. And in this case, I have the article title. It is Dark Matter Halos from the Inside Out. And then I happen to know the author's last name as well, James Taylor. Notice also that if I had a PubMed ID, I could plug that information in this field, or if I had a DOI, I could plug that information in the DOI field. So in this case, I'll go ahead and click on Go. And when I do that, the SFX menu will display with options for finding full text for the specific article. And notice that it displays in a separate tab in my browser. So I'm going to go ahead and close up this tab. And we're back to our Find eJournal A to Z list. So these 4 tabs that you see here, those make up a standard A to Z list that the user would see. Now I want to go back to the slides for just a moment here. In addition to the standard A to Z list that we just looked at, the SFX A to Z list browser toolbar, as you see here in this first screenshot, is available as an add-on component for only the Internet Explorer browser. And it allows your end users to just quickly search the SFX A to Z list from anywhere on the web because they will have this toolbar that exists. Also, it's possible, looking at the second screenshot, to generate the HTML for an embedded search box. And that would allow your users to do a quick search of the A to Z list from anywhere on your library's home page or any of your library's web pages. Now, in addition to the A to Z list for eJournals, there is a separate A to Z list for ebooks. And keep in mind they are very separate search interfaces. And the default URL for the ebook A to Z list is your SFX-based URL, as you see here, and including this /AZ book at the end. So that will generate your ebook A to Z list. The ebook search options are very similar to the A to Z list eJournal options. However, ebooks do not have categories and subcategories assigned, so you won't see any category options in the ebook search. And the results that display will be very similar to the A to Z list eJournal options that we just saw previously. And just to show you an example here, let's go back to our browser and we'll look at the Find eBook interface. So again, we have the same types of options. We have the header that displays here, the header image. We have the drop-down languages that can display. And we can enter the title of the ebook. And so I will just start entering a title here, and then also notice that we have the option to add an ISBN, an author's last name or first name, and then vendors will typically display here as well for ebooks. This is our training environment or one of our training environments, and so that information is not populating at the moment. I would click on Go, and when I do that, there we go. And when I do that, notice that my results display, and it looks very similar to what I saw previously in the eJournal A to Z list. Again, I have the options for the detailed view, which is what we're seeing here. It's letting me know what their full text is available via ABC Clio eBooks. I can switch to a table view as well. I'll also notice that there are thumbnails that are available for the book covers. So that's another option. But I'm going to switch to the table view. That's my brief view. And notice that I just get a few brief details here, the book title, the ISBN, the author, and then I have the information icon again, and then the swirly icon to generate the SFX menu. So very same options that we had, but this is just specifically for searching ebook titles. Going back to the slides. Lastly, there's also a mobile user interface for the A to Z lists and citation linker, as well as the SFX menu. And just to be clear, it's not an app, but a mobile interface. So all a user would need to do is type in or access the SFX URL on their mobile device to access the mobile interface screens, and you'll see examples of them here. You can also customize the banner that displays here in the mobile interface, and we'll cover that a little bit later. So let's talk next about what kinds of A to Z list customizations are available, as well as where and how to make the changes. So the changes to the A to Z lists, both for e-journals and for ebooks, can be found in the SFX Admin Center under Setup and Administration. There's a configuration section. And for the A to Z e-journal list, for those customizations, you would click on A to Z e-journal list, and for the A to Z ebook list, you would click on the link ebook search. So at this point, we're going to talk about the A to Z e-journal list customizations first. And what I want to do is show you the screen first that you'll be making changes from. So we're going to go back to the SFX Admin Center. And from the configuration area, we're going to click on A to Z e-journal list. We'll work with that first. So you'll notice in the A to Z list screen that we see here, there's a list of sections. So journals, quick search, display, content language, and UI language control section. Each of these sections are collapsed, and they can be expanded though by clicking on the plus sign to expand them. So we'll see that with the display section. And we are going to go through each of these sections that you see here. The first section that we'll display, and actually I'm going to go back to the slides to show you this, is as we see it here in this example, the SFX Journal Search Toolbar. And this is for in the Internet Explorer browser if you want the browser bar to display so that a user can enter an SFX title here and be able to search for it in the A to Z list for e-journals. In the Admin Center, we have a place here for the local library name and also the local library homepage. Now, if you want to implement the Internet Explorer browser add-on, as you see here in this screenshot, you'd also need to enable it on the server in a configuration file. And because we haven't on our training server enabled that, we do not see this area in the A to Z journal customization area that I'll be looking at live in just a moment with you. So that's why I'm showing it to you in a screenshot here. Now, to release the browser add-on to your users, you'd then need to provide them with a link that they could follow that would initiate the download and installation of this add-on. And again, this is just for Internet Explorer. The SFX Advanced Users Guide provides more detailed instructions on how this is implemented. So I won't go into more detail at this point. The next section is the Journals Quick Search section. So I will be showing you that live here actually. So this is the embedded search box that you can generate. So when you click on the Generate HTML Template button that you see here, a pop-up window is going to open. And this is where you can configure the search box. Here's a preview of actually what will be displayed. So you can give it a title, and by default it's called Journals Quick Search. Maybe you don't want to call it Journals Quick Search, maybe you want to call it something else. I'm just going to change the title here. Notice it changes the title in the preview area. So you can give it a title. You can also choose between a drop-down or radio buttons for the search option. So by default, it will show radio buttons, as you see here. But I can just change this to display in drop-down, and that's what it will look like for users. So it gives you a little preview. Once you've found a configuration that you're happy with, a title that you're happy with, search options that you're happy with, and we'll leave this at show radio buttons, and we'll just leave our title back to the default. So once you've found a configuration that you're happy with, you can click on the View HTML Code link that you see here. And the code will be updated in this top section pop-up that you see here. So you can copy the code. All of this is just HTML code. Copy that code and then paste it into the web page that you want the search box embedded into. So it's very quick and easy to do. I'll go ahead and click on Close at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and close this Journals Quick Search option up. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is the Display section. So the first two sections that we looked at, the Journals Quick Search and also the section for the browser, the Internet Explorer browser add-on, those focus on creating additional access points for your users. The rest of the sections that we're going to focus on will focus on the changes that you can make to the A to Z list's appearance and function. So again, we're going to be looking at the Display section first. The Display section here contains the bulk of the changes that you make to the A to Z list. And in this section, the first option here allows you to set the number of records per page. And this is the maximum number of search results that your users will see before they have to click on the next button. So just to show you this, let me actually go to my Find eJournal page. We'll go back to the Title tab. And here's our list of titles here. So by default, we're seeing 20 titles on the page before I need to click on the next set of titles or click on one of the page links here. I'm just going to go back, back to our SFX Admin Center, eJournal list configuration screen. And again, by default, it's set to 20. We do recommend that for best performance, you set this value to less than 100. Otherwise, you may see some performance issues. Maximum pagination links, that's the next option that we see here. And also pagination link character length. These two settings affect how your search results are divided. So for example, I have maximum pagination link set to 5, and the pagination character link, or character length rather, set to 3. Now in the user interface, let's actually go there next. So let's go back to our Find eJournal results. In the user interface, this means that we see 5 alphabetical divisions of the results list. So, and these are each considered pages. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I can go to 5 pages, and when I click on next set of titles, that will take me to the next 5 pages. So I have 5 pagination links that appear here. And then you'll notice that each division spans a section defined with 3 lettered headers. So we have 3 letters, 3 letters, 3 letters, 3 letters, or well, close to 3 letters, since there aren't 3 letters available at that point. So the max pagination is 5 pages before we have to click on next set of titles and get the next 5 pages. And the pagination character length is set to 3 in this example. Going back to our customization list here for eJournals in the SFX Admin Center, the default view that you see here, this next option, this defines how much information you want to show to the user initially about their search results. And the table view, which I believe is the default, this will show, again, the title, the ISSN of the journal, and the user that can then click on the information icon, or the SFX swirly icon. So that's what we see here. This is the brief, or in other words, the table view that you see here. The detail view, I'm just going to go ahead and switch to detail view, will show you all of the information basically for each title. So you have the option here to decide when they come to the A to Z list and they do a search, what should users see by default, the table view or the detail view. Remember that the user is given the option to switch views on their own by using going back to the A to Z list here, the switch to table view or switch to detail view. But you can determine what the user sees by default when they first see the results. The next option that we'll take a look at here is the default search. So we'll see that here, and notice our options are starts with, contains, and exact. And here you can define the radio button that's selected by default when a user first comes to the A to Z list and does a search. Notice that the A to Z list title tab, if we go to that in our A to Z list, does not have an exact option. Only the locate tab, and I just clicked on that, here we go, has all three options, starts with, contains, and exact. So if you set exact as the default, as you see here, it will be the default, it will default to exact on the locate tab, but on the title tab it will default to starts with. So just to give you an idea of how that works. Then there is starts with results form. That's our next option. And that controls how the starts with search behaves. And I'm actually going to show you a screenshot for you for this. Let's see. Here we go. So starts with results from, and notice our options are browse and search. So when the starts with results form is set to browse, and the user conducts a starts with search, they're dropped into an alphabetical list of journals with their search term. As we see here, they've searched for the title astronomy, so that their search term of astronomy will act as the starting point. But then as they continue through the list, notice they can click next and previous. That will take them through the list alphabetically. If you have the user, the starts with form set to search, that's the other option here. If they do a starts with search and they type in their title here, the user is brought to a very specific list of journals that start with that word. So notice that we have a very specific list here, 9 titles that start with the word astronomy. The next option we'll take a look at here is enable AJAX for title search. Now this option enables an autocomplete feature. And actually let's look at this live. So from Find eJournal, I'm going to click on the title tab. And I'm going to start typing a title. And as I start typing that search term here or that title, a list of possibilities appears below the search box. And as I continue typing, it will actually automatically refine that list. So when you enter a value in the, hold on, let me go back here. When you enter a value in the Define AJAX subset search size box, you can reduce the search set that's retrieved and sorted to a smaller list for performance reasons. By default, this text box is empty, which means that no set value is currently being used. But here you have, again, the option to decide if you would like autocomplete on or if you would want to remove autocomplete. Next up is related object information. So we're looking at this option next. The SFX knowledge base has information about related objects. So for example, if a journal ceases publication and is continued by another journal, those two journals are considered related. Another example would be a journal and its supplements. So if this option is checked, as it is here, the checkbox is selected, your users can benefit from this information and see the related journals information in the A to Z list. Now in this example, we can see, actually, let's go back to Find eJournal. And let's go back to the table view just to shorten our view up a little bit here. So in this example, we can see that AC Flyer. If I click on either View Journal History for additional full text or the information button, if I scroll down to the bottom, as we saw a little bit earlier, notice it has the journal history, and this particular title was absorbed by a title, Business and Commercial Aviation. And so at this point, I can actually click on Absorbed By, and that will take me to that particular journal title. And this is the one I actually subscribe to. Notice that the AC Flyer title, I don't subscribe to that, but it is related to a journal that I do subscribe to. So going back here with the related journals or related object information, also note, and this is the second option that we have here, that you can decide if you want any related journals that don't have any active services to display in the A to Z list if they are related to journals that do have active services. So this is an option to select as well. These two options are related. There are a couple of things that you can choose to hide in the user interface. So we'll look at the hide options next. So first of all, you can hide the switch views option. So that means that in the Find eJournal interface, the user will not have the switch to detail view or switch to table view link. It will be hidden for them, and whatever you set by default is what they will see. The other option is, going back here, you can hide the citation linker tab. So if citation linker is not going to be very useful to your users, you can actually just hide that from displaying. So the A to Z list will only show 3 tabs instead of 4. The last choice in this section, or actually one of the last choices that we see in this section here, is whether or not you want to give your users the ability to push journal information to their MetaLib My eJournals list. And if you do have that MetaLib integration, this link will appear as an icon next to the SFX swirly icon. And actually, let me show you an example of this. So if MetaLib link, if this checkbox is selected, you would indicate your MetaLib base URL. And when that's completed, when a user does a search to see results, next to the information and the button and the SFX swirly icon, you'll also see this MetaLib icon. So a user can click on that, and that will push that journal information to their MetaLib My eJournals list. Going back to the A to Z list eJournal customizations, the last thing that I'll mention here is you can also show a peer review indicator. So if a journal is peer reviewed, you can decide whether you want some visual indicator to tell a user that yes, a journal is peer reviewed or not. And you can choose an image or text. So let me show you this. Let's click on the letter A here. And I believe if we scroll down, yes, the last title in this first page, notice that there's a little icon that's listed. And if I mouse over it, it says peer reviewed. So this is just a visual indicator that yes, this journal is peer reviewed. You can also have text that displays that says peer reviewed instead of an image. Notice in your information button, you'll always have peer reviewed indicated here. So just a couple of options that you'll have. And just scrolling down for just a moment, once you've made any changes to any of these sections, you'll notice that there's a Save Default Profile and Edit Custom Profile button here. So once you've finished making any display changes or any of the other changes that we'll go through in just a moment, you can click on the Save Default Profile button to save your changes. If you're in a consortium, custom profiles can be used to customize views for individual libraries in the consortium. And so you would click on Edit Custom Profiles on that button that we see here to edit or add a profile and then customize it. Just going back to the slides for a moment here. Even though there are quite a few options to customize the A to Z list display in the SFX Admin Center, there are a few display-related changes that you might want to make that involve changing files directly on the server. So for example, the header image in the A to Z list, or if you would want to change colors and fonts that display in the A to Z list, you would need to do those changes in files that are directly on the server. More information on these kinds of server-related changes can be found in the SFX Advanced Users Guide. So the next section we're going to take a look at is the content section. So I'll actually go live to that. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse the display section, and next we'll look at the content section. Here you can decide which services you'd like to display or hide in the A to Z list menu. And so you can see which services to display, and so you would select those. You can also choose to exclude certain targets in the A to Z list. And you can actually see a detailed view of a journal by default. Actually, let me go back to the slides here to show you this. So here we see the full text services for this particular journal, and I can see both of the targets that have this journal. So we have two different targets here that have this particular journal title. If I wanted to exclude DOAJ from this view, I would add it to the excluded target list. And this won't deactivate the target itself, but it will still function as normal. It will still perform its link resolution duties, but it just won't be visible in the A to Z list. And so that's target services to exclude in this area. I'm going to go back to the live version at this point. And you can also select which elements you may want to remove from the A to Z list view. And it will also remove those elements when you click on the information button. So here I've selected the Library of Congress classification number and codon. So by selecting them, I'm removing them from the view. And these won't display in the information button either. Just to give you another example, if you didn't want categories to display to users in the A to Z list, you can just select the categories button here, or the categories option here, and that will remove it from the view when you've saved the default profile. The next section is the language section. So I'm going to go ahead and close up the content section, and we'll look at languages. In the language section, I can define the user interface language set. And this is the list of languages that will appear in the drop-down menu in the A to Z list. And you'll notice that in the user interface, the language options appear in their native language. Let me see if I have an example of this in the slide. And I do here. So you can see the languages appear here, so you would select them from that customization area. I notice they do appear in their actual native language. If I choose to view the A to Z list in French, one thing that you'll notice is that the language in the tabs is translated, and some of the text in the search results is translated, but not all of it. And this is because some of the information in the search results is derived from the object, the target, and the category names that are defined in the knowledge base. So not all of these are translated automatically. Let me actually show you this live. So I'm just going to go ahead and scroll up. I'm going to change my language option to French. And notice that many of the labels are translated, but notice that the titles themselves are not translated. And that's because they're coming from the SFX knowledge base. And if I click on, let's look at the detailed view. I'm going to click on the Switch Views link. And notice that the categories are not translated. Again, that's because it's all coming from the SFX knowledge base. And also, the target names are not translated either. But other text labels that appear on the screen, they will be translated. But anything from the knowledge base will not be translated automatically. Going back to our list of languages here, so you would select which languages you would want to see in that drop-down. You can also select the default language, so when the user first comes to the A to Z list, what language should be displayed for them, in this case English. And you can select your country, in this case the United States. And under Select Your Headers, you can define one or more headers to show in the A to Z list. So an example of a header, actually let me go back to the slides to show you this. What you see here, this alphabetical listing here, is considered a header. So in this case, I actually have 3 different headers that are displaying. So just to give you an example of the types of headers here. Here we have selected headers. So from the list here on the left-hand side, we've selected 3 of them: U.S. standard headers, small sites headers, and Hebrew headers. And so when we look at that, this is the standard header. This is the small sites header, and notice that it just kind of groups together the titles. And then we have the Hebrew header as well. So it's something you can play with. Going back to the list of customizations here, the last option we'll take a look at in the language header, or the language section rather, is Latin diacritics handling. So this defines how Latin diacritics are handled, and in the SFX General Users Guide, there's more detail on how each of these options are rendered. There are a few ways that you can control the UI language also in the A to Z list. And so that's the last section that we'll look at, UI language control section. And you can decide whether or not you'd like to give your users the ability to limit search results based on the journal's written system language. So for example, if you would want them to be able to filter the results list by Chinese journals or Japanese journals, for instance, or Korean. If this is something that you are interested in, there is more detail in the SFX General Users Guide. Going back to the slides. We've been talking about the customizations available for the A to Z e-journals list. Now there are also customizations available for the A to Z ebook list. And they're accessible from the Admin Center again, but let's go there now. Under Configuration, now we're going to eBook Search. And this is specifically for the A to Z list ebook customizations. They are actually, if you look at these sections here, very similar to the A to Z e-journal list customizations. And once you have those A to Z e-journal customizations configured, in the ebook search area, if you want to carry over those customizations to your ebook A to Z list, you can simply click on the Copy A to Z e-journals configuration wizard. So click on that button, and that will allow you to have the same customizations in your A to Z list and also in your ebook A to Z list. One option that is unique, however, to the ebook A to Z list is the display links between ebook search and A to Z e-journals end user interface and or interfaces. The e-journals A to Z list and the ebook A to Z list are typically separate URLs, as we saw earlier. However, you can combine those two searches into one URL, and they're still separate searches on separate tabs, but they can both be accessed from the same URL. So let me actually show you an example of this using one of our customers. They have chosen to implement this option. So from one URL, it's actually /azbook. They're using that URL. Notice that two different options appear. Find eJournal, and here's the search for that, and find ebook, and here's the search for that. Now keep in mind they are still separate searches on separate tabs, but both can be accessed from the same URL. Note that you also have the option using the display links between ebook search and A to Z eJournals end user interfaces. You also have the option to decide which would be the default that you use, and another option that's very unique to ebooks is you can display book thumbnails. And so if you decide yes, you can decide where you would want those images to come from, Google Books or Amazon. So let's go back to the slides. We just talked about the ebook search. So we've covered what you need to know to customize the A to Z lists, but let's back up just a minute. In order to see your own A to Z list, you're going to have it built first. And the first step in this process is making sure you've got the country and the headers defined in the languages section. If you don't, you're going to get an error message in the next few steps that need to happen. Typically, this is all taken care of for you during your implementation process, but I'll just mention it. So next, you'll need to get on the server to run two different jobs, the RSI, or Rapid Service Indicator job, and also the A to Z list index job. RSI is used by other applications such as Primo and MetaLib, and it offers an interface for querying the SFX knowledge base for the availability of specific journals and ebooks identified by their ISBN and ISSN and so on. And it's also used, this RSI job, is also used to generate your A to Z list. Now the A to Z indexing process looks at your knowledge base to determine what resources should appear in the A to Z list. And we'll talk further about these two jobs in the systems administration session, so I won't demonstrate that at this point. Now you can imagine that if the indexing process needs to be run to reflect what's in the knowledge base, you're also going to need to run it again every time you make changes to your knowledge base. So if you've activated a new target or target service or object, those jobs need to run. So the indexing process can be set up to run automatically, and we actually recommend that it runs daily or perhaps nightly. And you would schedule the RSI job to run first, and then schedule the A to Z list indexing job to run next. Again, this will all be covered in the system administration session, but just to give you an idea of what is involved in building and updating the A to Z list. Now, when you're making changes, sometimes you'll need to build the A to Z list to see the changes to the A to Z list. Other times the changes will appear just after you make them in the SFX Admin Center. So just to kind of recap this a little bit, any changes to your knowledge base, such as activating or deactivating targets or services or object portfolios, will depend on the rebuild. In other words, the A to Z list indexing job needs to run. So that job needs to run first in order to see the changes in the A to Z list. However, for many of the changes that we saw in this session that I just showed you using the SFX Admin Center, most of these can actually be seen immediately after you save them. So and that's nice when you're just starting out and you want to test configurations to see which ones you prefer. The exception is for any A to Z list customizations that are identified with an asterisk or sometimes two asterisks, indicating that the A to Z list indexing job and or the RSI job needs to be run before the changes will display in the user interface. So let's actually take a look at this. We're going back to the Admin Center, and we're in the configuration area. And right now we're in the ebook search, but the same thing would apply to the A to Z journal list section as well. Anytime you see an asterisk, or in this case 2 asterisks, that means a job needs to run in order for the changes to display in the A to Z list user interface. And if you actually look at the very bottom of the screen, there's a little legend here or a key. So if there's 1 asterisk, it requires a rebuild of the RSI job and the ebook search indexes in this case because we're in ebooks. The double asterisk means that it requires a rebuild of the ebook search index only. So just to give you an idea, any options that do not have an asterisk, you can make those changes, click on Save Default Profile, and you'll be able to see those changes immediately. But again, for those that have asterisks next to them, it requires a job to run in order to see those changes. Going back to the slides here, just some best practices. So what we've covered are the possible customizations that you can make to the A to Z list. And so let's just sum up some best practices at this point. Defaults are good. It's okay to leave everything as its default and change only what drives you or your users crazy, as opposed to approaching each option as a decision that you have to make. Configure the pagination or number of records per page based on your own resources. So keep your resources in mind. There's no rule that's going to apply to everyone in every situation because your resources are unique. Also, keep your users in mind. When you're customizing your views and configuring how search behaves, you'll just want to make sure that these are set up to be friendly to your users. And if you support multiple languages at your institution, you'll want to make sure that SFX can do the same thing by implementing, for example, the language options. So let's turn our attention now to language and display, and actually it would be translation and text labels that appear in the eJournal and the ebook A to Z list. So to do this, we'll now be switching the area that we're working in. We're still in the configuration area in the SFX Admin Center, but we're now going to be working in translations and display. The translation and display area allows you to customize the wording for all of the text elements that are used in the A to Z lists, as well as the SFX menu as well. But we're going to focus primarily on the A to Z list at this point in this session. And this can apply to one or more of the languages that you want to make available to your users. So this tool allows you to change all of the text elements in the language of your choice, return to default settings. You can add or remove a language, as you see up here, add or remove a language. And you can run the mapping wizard to import existing configurations. So what will happen is the very, very first time you go to translation and display, the SFX admin mapping wizard will appear. And this wizard will import your existing menu language settings as defined in the configuration files on the server. So it will bring all of those configurations into the SFX admin center, into this translation and display area, and you can make changes here in the SFX admin center. The areas that that will impact the A to Z list in particular are the tabs for A to Z citation linker, A to Z main, and A to Z info pop-up. And actually, let's go over there live just in the last few minutes here. And from the configuration area, just using the navigation bar up here, I'm going to click on Translation and Display. And here we see the various tabs that we can make changes to for the text elements. If I wanted to make a change to perhaps the labels that appear, let me actually go back to our A to Z list example here, and we'll go back to English. Let's say that I wanted to change the titles of these tabs. That's very possible to do using the Translation and Display area. So I'm going to change my current language here. We're going to change that to English. And if I look at the, we'll look at the A to Z main area. And notice that one of the terms here, or one of the text elements, is title. And in the description area, this is telling us that this term is the wording on the navigation tab for title. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to change it to something else. So I'm going to click on the E for Edit. And let's say I want to call it Titles, or I can call it, again, anything that I would think would be helpful to my users. And I'm going to click on Update. So that Title tab will now be called Titles, plural. So this is a quick and easy way to relabel the tabs that display in the A to Z list, as well as any of the other fields that you see here. So I'll go ahead and go back to the slides here, and this actually brings us to the end of our session. So just to briefly summarize, we talked about where and how to customize the eJournal and eBook A to Z lists, where to customize the translation and language display if you want to change any of the text labels that appear in the A to Z lists or in the SFX menu as well. And also we covered some best practices for UI customization or user interface customization for the A to Z list. This is a list of documents that will provide more information on A to Z list customizations. These can all be found in the Documentation Center. The General User's Guide will have more details on many of the A to Z list customizations we talked about in this session. Now just to note that the ebook A to Z list has its own guide, the ebook search guide, and that will explain customizations that can be made to the ebook A to Z list. The Advanced User's Guide will have information on making A to Z list customization changes on the server, such as for color or font changes or changing the header that appears at the A to Z list to be your institution's own logo. And then additionally, I have the Systems Administration Guide. This will have more information about the RSI and A to Z indexing jobs that were mentioned in this session. And we'll discuss them more in the System Administration session. Thanks for joining me.